Good afternoon. All the hard truth in easy terms by Henry Keane in UATV English studio for the whole free world, directly from Ukraine as usual. No more Shoigu. Remember him? The guy, the most important general of the generals, Minister of Defense and Assault of Russia. Before that, the guy was the Minister of Emergency Situations. He was responsible for there being no floods or fires in Russia, but dams still crumble and mass fires are breaking out. And the army does not look like even somewhat that victorious as Putin would like it to. And as he was actually informed by Shoigu, it looks like. But it doesn't. Anyway, so no more Shoigu. The replacement of Shoigu is the last resort, actually. No more shuffling of the military deck is available. Where is General Comrade Gerasimov, by the way? Why he has never appeared in public for more than 6 months and it is not known where he is? Where is his deputy, Comrade Surovikin, in the pre-trial detention center? Where is Shoigu's deputy, Tumar Ivanov, after all, in the pre-trial detention center? Where is the head of one of the most effective units in Russia, PMC Wagner Prigozhin, after all? They all are either dead, jailed, or simply disappeared. Well, only Putin is internal. Of course, Shoigu was not just removed from the office. He was transferred mildly to another high-profile chair. Well, then what kind of a Tsar Putin is if he was as weak defense minister as he actually was? Now Shoigu becomes the Security Council of Russia head. He might have the position, but surely has no more power. So why did Shoigu have to go? He was loyal to his landlord, after all. Well, because there was too much of Comrade Patrushev in power, and so Shoigu, as Patrushev's man, has to go. And the chair goes to Comrade Belousov. Comrade Belousov is a protege of the so-called Grev-Kirienko Kremlin influence group, whom Putin trusts very much. Here is when I stop shuffling these Russian names for you and explain all the mayhem in Kremlin in easy terms. The inner logic of all that is as dead simple as it always is, was and will be the case with any dictators in the history of humanity. Loyalty, personally, to the Tsar must come absolutely first. The country, the nation, the war, the past, the present and the future, all that maybe matters, but after the Putin. That's right, the Putin, because this is exactly how anyone in Russia has to pronounce it after Putin amended a constitution as per his whimsies. He is Putin the first and only. And that is exactly the behavior we will see from Comrade Belousov, no doubt. However, Comrade Belousov is indeed smart, and it would be a big mistake for Ukraine to underestimate him. So we won't. We understand all this mess in the Kremlin and Putin's favor-castling game of balancing the growing power of one pack of Kremlin vultures over the others, in others to keep his own absolute power over the whole flock safe. So Putin castled. Patrushev remains in the inner circle and remains amongst the closest of Sauron's Nazguls. But it will be more difficult for his man Shoigu to build a self-closed secret system now. The Tsar will have even more control now. No more unnecessary initiative for Putin, no more irritation of the Tsar, Royal Soviet Highness. What Ukraine and the world has really to keep in mind in all this, Shoigu has been replaced by a much smarter opponent. What shall we do? As usual, to play twice smarter. Why would Putin need someone smart, as smart people are harder and definitely more expensive to control? And that is exactly why Putin appoints the economist, which is, by the way, Belousov, to the military post of Minister of Defense. Because war is an expensive adventure, and the resources are scarce, and they are scarce and expensive, so they should be used more rationally. Who said sanctions does not work? Well, they do. Even more needed now of sanctions in order to finish off Putinism as it is, and as imperial Russia, as the empire is living out its last days, if not politically, then obviously economically. Well, there are voices that are quite experienced to ignore. If you ask me, that Putin is stuck in his aggressive war against Ukraine in the middle and is looking for a way to untangle the political economic disaster caused by himself. Voices insist Putin is looking for negotiations, no less. And to do that, he needs a smart man indeed. Well, I don't know about that. All I know is we in Ukraine never expect any good from any single thing coming from Russia and from the Kremlin. Any misty castling in the Kremlin ends up with just more missiles and shellings and death of civilians for us here in Ukraine, as simple as that. So we better be ready for worse, as usual, just in case this time is also what it is, Russia. It's Putin's fifth term. Fifth. 24 years in power and 6 more to go. And it will lead Russia right to where it belongs, maybe, to even greater decline. Putin indeed is what he says to Russia. He is a guarantor of sorts, a guarantor of the continuation of war, the guarantor of the corruption to flourish. He also guarantees the lack of rights for all Russians and lots of social bonuses, like a separate cemetery for political opponents, for example, the demographic crisis, and absolute impunity for those in power, renovation of Stalin times repressions, apparatus, international isolation, further radical Islamization of Russia. The demographic balance in the country is not a balance, it's negative. It is a bare fact. The birth rate in Russia continues to fall. A trend will continue until 2030, 2035. But Putin can fix everything. So he probably can also fix that, right? Not to worry, he's a father to the nation, a grandfather rather, still in power, forever in power. A personal deficit, according to the most optimistic forecasts of sociologists. This marker will continue to slide in Russia at least till 2040. Well, in easy terms, the lives of Russians are consumables for Russian authorities. Only a rare few have the opportunity to return home from Putin's war, from the front line in Ukraine. The bulk of the Russian military are either dead or disabled now, or that is exactly what awaits for them here. Mark my words. During the quarter century of Putin's Tsaric rule, no less, most of his promises remain unfulfilled. Like minimum retirement age is not raised. Housing and communal services tariffs are growing very rapidly and every year. Well, to get rid of those emergency status housings, improve demographics, and blah, 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 and so on, Putin's personal strategy, loyalty to me as the Tsar instead of the professionalism for the country, has logically led Russia to what it should do, the triumph of corruption and degradation of the vertical power structure, the army and the intelligence services just as well. So Russians will inevitably face the fate of refugees on their own land. People will flee from bad border regions, from natural disaster zones. The incompetence and inaction of Putin's government is best demonstrated during large-scale floods. They just don't care, these people. Knowing about the impending danger, local authorities took no measures to avoid disasters. While people were forced to evacuate en masse, the mayors of drowning cities continued to live their usual lives, ignoring the urging necessities to provide simple things, food and medical assistance to victims. And they never held accountable for that. That is Putin's reality, which he made a future for all of the country. The family of the mayor of flooded Orsk city lives in an elite residential complex with goddamn swimming pool in, ta-da, Dubai, that worth 33 million rubles roughly, while people of his city are flooded and cannot find food and water. That is Putin's face. Well, of course, the Kremlin plans to continue the war, which gives it the opportunity to uncontrollably and rapidly enrich itself, completely ignoring the life and well-being of consumable Russians. Putin's eternal rule has led to the fact even his biggest favorite, Russian army, is simply ineffective. When money for the missiles goes into the pockets of the generals, New high-tech developments and all that kind of stuff are only paperwork and propaganda, and outdated Russian bombs are exploding on Russian land. And today, another FAB-500 bomb simply fell a few meters from residential buildings in Belgorod city. Well, yesterday, in the same city of Belgorod, a house collapsed, according to the Russian media, due to Ukrainian shelling. Well, as we, and only we, explained yesterday, the ballistics and physics just do not want to work for the Kremlin. We're so very sorry. But what do the Russians say today when Russian FAB-500 bombs just fall from their own Russian jets onto Russian houses, into Russian cities, and does not explode? And what do? Wait for direct Putin's command? Anyway, I have no doubt they will say it is us, Ukrainians, just in case. But my sincere advice to all Russians is to look for the reasons of your own mess in your own house. Look in the Kremlin. Well, one day you will be forced to do that anyway. When I was in New York filming President Zelensky's speech in UN Nations headquarters, one of my colleagues from quite a famous American edition came to me and asked a question. He asked me, "Henry, don't you think America is doing enough to help Ukraine? And maybe even more than enough, maybe even too much?" I asked if he had 60 seconds for me, and he said yes. Then I asked, did he know that out of the last multi-billion-dollar military aid, a lion's share stays in America? Literally, even physically, meaning American dollars are sent to American weapon producers without even leaving America. And America has a chance to get rid of its old-time adversary for good, with Ukrainian hands holding not at all newest American weapons. And the money Ukraine paid for it is actually used to create these newest modern versions of arms for Americans. I remember he was shocked after my answer, and it took some time for him to do some arithmetics, and he never asked that question again. The columnist of the British newspaper, The Telegraph, states with the facts and figures, just by the way, that many critics of American aid to Ukraine do not understand that most of the money never actually leaves the United States and is used for new, more modern equipment for the American armed forces. He cites the example of the latest Iron Fist active defense military equipment, which, thanks to purchases from Ukraine, will be joining the US Army much faster than it would be in the case otherwise. The author of the article explains that this is because the United States usually supports Ukraine by donating all their weapons from the existing US stockpile, and then uses funds allocated to aid Ukraine to re-equip American forces with newer weaponry to replace those sent to Ukraine, and when Ukraine needed and more ASAP.
We expected Russia to launch an offensive on Kharkiv and work closely with Ukraine to help them prepare. In the coming weeks, Russia will likely increase the intensity of attacks and deploy additional troops in an attempt to create a buffer zone along the Ukrainian border. John Kirby, coordinator for strategic communication of the National Security Council of the US.
The United States government announced the new package of defense assistance to Ukraine approved on Friday, worth $400 million. The package includes equipment that meets the most urgent needs on the battlefield, including air defense artillery shells, armored vehicles, and anti-tank weaponry, the Pentagon announced. It includes also additional anti-aircraft missiles for Patriot and NASAMS. It also includes Stinger anti-aircraft missiles, equipment for integration of Western launchers, missiles and radars into Ukrainian systems, additional HIMARS and shells, 155 and 105 mm caliber artillery shells, TOW and Javelin missiles, AT-4 anti-armor systems, high-precision ammunition for hitting targets in the air. High-speed anti-radiation missiles, Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, M113 armored infantry vehicles, mine and ambush-resistant vehicles, and river patrol boats, small arms and grenades, protection against damage by chemical and biological weapons, destructive projectiles, spare parts. So what one should really do next time, just as my American colleague, in doubt whether helping Ukraine until it wins is financially worth it. In easy terms, one should watch this video again and do some arithmetics already. Well, that concludes today's video. Thank you for watching and please stay updated. Comment, like and subscribe to UATV English for more truths directly from Ukraine. Your support is what matters. Thank you so very much and see you soon.